No, 1 more minute. Okay, good morning, welcome everybody. I think we'll just go ahead and start. It's 9 o'clock. As you may have realized, a little bit of confusion. We are set here with 7 presentations, so since time may get a little bit short, we just decided to start. Although we're still waiting for 2 very prominent speakers. And just for your information, you are now at the session discussing key topics for ethics in the RDA community. Maybe just a little bit about the background. Zorma Baoya, who's unfortunately not here today.
You want to speak to the microphone?
Oh.
The online audience.
Oh, the progress. Okay. So I'll just say welcome again to this session on ethics in the RDA community. And basically, we're sharing practices and also see how we move forward. So as I said, we will start now sharp. We have 7 presentations for today's session. And basically just a very little intro regarding the background before we get started is that we are several of us that have been working on different aspects of ethics in the RDA community over quite a long time. And we've had different sessions at the different plenaries. Now, this exchange has kept on going, and then it hasn't been very active for some time. And then we've decided also that these questions keep popping up in many aspects, also with regard to disciplinary aspects, but also with regard in particular with open science. So this is planned as a kind of a restart, a boost for setting the agenda for the ethics question within the RDA community. So we have set the presentations for being like, I guess, 5 minutes or so, which will be really challenging, having seen slides of some of the co-presenters, but we will try to keep it this way so that we can actually have time for discussion and for communicating with you and getting feedback also from your perspective. Now, the first speaker out is our dear Edith Herzog, and I had hoped that she would have jumped in while I was giving the intro. She's not, as far as I can see, so we will start with the next speaker. Maria, and you can, I think, say your last name yourself because, yeah.
If nobody's Greek here, probably you don't recognize.
So, yeah. Yeah, we should do it more technical than me. Just
okay. Yeah. So, good morning, everybody. My name is Maria. I work for the Institute of Biomedical Informatics in Cologne. It's part of the University Hospital and the University of Cologne. And today I'm going to talk to you about the work I've done in the framework of a project we have as an institute The objective is to create a curriculum, an ELSA curriculum, ethical, legal, societal aspects curriculum for data scientists. I'm a computer scientist myself, so. First of all, why do we need an ELSA curriculum for data scientists? Having done some kind of background research, mostly based on surveys that have been published, the profile of the data scientist now is that most of the data scientists have most tertiary education degrees. They are computer scientists or engineers or relevant from the relevant domains. And also few institutions, universities offer ELSA courses for data scientists specifically. And even fewer employees demand ELSA education or experience. However, in the future, as trends are seeming to be going, data scientists will already come actually from heterogeneous education levels. They can be people with university degrees, PhDs, masters, but even people who have followed online courses or self-study. There are people who transition from other sectors, and in the future, data scientists will not have a homogeneous background, and which is basically the target group of today's ethics curricula, even the few that exist. So the vision and the objective of the curriculum first is to raise the awareness on ELSA issues. This is not to be taken for granted in the work I do for another project for the National Research Infrastructure for Data Science. We take interviews from active data scientists. Very few of them have any kind of familiarity with especially ethical issues. Legal, of course, they are obliged to have. So it's something that is not to be discarded, that there is awareness. The objective is to not to make data scientists legal experts or ethical experts, is to establish a common language with the domain experts so that they can communicate into interdisciplinary groups and try to find appropriate solution. And finally, for all this to work, we think that the most appropriate way is to incorporate ELSA in the data science workflow so that people actually take into consideration the ethical, legal, and societal issues while they are working in their projects. That's why we structure the curriculum based on the CRISP-DM model, which is well known and used in many projects. It is already used to develop frameworks. You can find in the bibliography. And for you that you may be not familiar with this is the very general description. It basically consists of different phases, starting from the problem definition, which is called the business understanding phase. Then we have data collection, data processing, modeling, the execution, the evaluation, and the deployment of the model. This is a cycle, and there are a lot of feedback loops. So regarding the curriculums, we have some vertical modules which correspond to the different phases, and some horizontal knowledge units who basically follow three strands. There is an ethical and societal strand, then we have some legal knowledge, and finally some technical rendering. This is a more detailed, let's say, view, but it's not totally fine-grained. These are issues that can be actually, let's say, assigned in each phase. We have in the business understanding, for example, we have a stakeholder identification. We also have some modules for incorporating community values, for example, professional codes, guidelines and principles, and we have some basic legal concepts. Then, in the rest of the phases, we have what I call the technical rendering. That does not mean that the objective is to teach programming to data scientists. We're not going to teach them their work. We just identify issues like bias, for example, the use of synthetic data, annotation issues, anonymization issues, and actually identify them as ethical or legal issues, and we probably give them some kind of hint that there is a way to technically attack these issues. And finally, there is a documentation module that actually travels the whole curriculum so that everything can be properly documented in order to ensure accountability and provide trust. So the next steps is to identify the content delivery, the evaluation methods, and what classroom techniques that has to do with the program duration and form. That is how long the data scientists are eager to be subjected to some kind of education, and in what form. For example, in workshops, in online courses. For this, we are currently running a survey. And we also have to see what kind of classroom techniques we employ, whether we have case studies or hands-on workshops, or even some kind of lectures. And finally, the evaluation methods. One way to evaluate is through participant engagement. And there probably it would be nice to have some kind of long-term evaluation to see whether the people who actually followed this course have used these things, whether it was useful actually for them. So this there is a detailed description in this report. It's a project report. As I said, it is part of the FAIR Data Spaces project that is funded by the German Ministry of Education. And I think I was quite fast. So thank you. I hope not too fast.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Maria. I think what we'll do is we will run through the presentations and take questions at the end. And now Edith is here as well, so welcome. Okay, I'll check. Let me check if it's on. No, it's not. So I figure it out. No, put it on here. And then maybe someone can speak. Okay, I'll speak. Okay, so the first presentation on towards the ELSA curriculum for data scientists presented by Maria is of a very different kind than what I will talk about. So my name is Ingvild. And no, how do I get? Why doesn't it move? It's not active. Excuse me? It's not. Yes, green, but it's not. I'm not able to move the mouse.
No, it was just on the other screen. It was over there.
Oh, well.
And let's go.
Okay, so now to me and a very different kind of topic. So for those of you who have listened to some of my presentation in previous times, I'll try to keep this really short, is that one of my concerns has been that I'm coming from a discipline. I work on the so-called children born of war. These are children born in crisis regions from enemy soldiers, very often conceived out of conflict-related sexual violence. Now, at the same time, having worked at the research data infrastructure for 25 years, the GIS is, one of the things that I've observed is that, yes, we can develop a lot of nice cycles and ideas and curriculums and a lot of things. They are very not often known or not even applied in the disciplines we work with. So when I talk about what I talk about in terms of data management plans or research data cycles, that people don't know what to do with it. So I'm trying to merge the silos, and this is probably going to be a dedication for a lot of years, but I hope that RDA can offer also a setting, because it's increasingly becoming a topic also in the field and NGOs and funding areas with regard to what do they do with all the data and information collected, and then also what is data at all. Because a lot of the data that is collected in immediate conflict settings can, of course, be used for research data later on. We have experience as far back as World War I, and I work with data from World War II, register, administrative data, law, all kinds of course. Everything can be made into data. But just to give you a little bit of quick insights in who we're talking about is children that are born as a result of armed conflict. So they wouldn't have been born if it wouldn't have been for the conflict. Emigrations, occupation children also here in Austria, conceived by also the parts of the Russian army or the US forces, and in Germany, in Norway, we had the German ones. Today we deal with the children of the ISIS and the ISIS fighters. And I can tell you, wherever there's a conflict, wherever we have these children. So they're fathered by any kind of born in hostilities, foreign soldier, paramilitary officer, rebel. We had to expand the group because the wars have changed from national conflicts to civil conflicts. That is how also data collection is connected to how real life changes, which I think is also very important to keep in mind. And that the relationships differ in nature. Very often it is, today everybody's just talking about the children born of conflict-related sexual violence, which is a strong limitation, because we know, those of us who do research and look at the evidence, that for many of the children being born in so-called consensual relationships, the world has been devastating too. So what is consensual in times of wars and conflicts, particularly if you're a woman living at an emergency situation? So that's just a background. So on the basis of a lot of this evidence on the reports and the literature, and I'm happy to show you when we entered the discussion, I came up with this model years back, being a comparative political scientist, while I was still called Mohman. So it's actually also my models. But you can see here that you can divide a lot of the evidence, and that's based on all kinds of data sources that we see 4 areas that are actually proven to be valid even today when it comes to the challenges that these children born of war are exposed to. Needless to say, all children exposed to war have devastating experiences. What we thought is quite interesting, having been in this research field for so long, is that these children seem to be influenced by all these consequences at the same time, and very often due to their perceived enemy status in the societies they grow up in, which is very often the mother society. Now, a lot of the challenges we're dealing with the children born of war, I've just mentioned some of them here, but one of the things that I want to focus on here, which is related to the experiences we have with data collections in times of crisis, and I think that goes for a lot of different similar research areas. So basically you can transfer and scale it to any other kind of data collection in conflict zones or in crisis, as I said, emergency, environmental, and so on. Is that very often in times of crisis, you're dealing with information that, how do you collect the data without endangering the population, which is already maybe quite vulnerable. In this case, we're talking about the mothers and the children, particularly also when the interests may be different. I don't want to go into details, but when you start collecting data on children born of war, and particularly those conceived out of conflict-related sexual violence, you have, for example, the situation that mothers may kill their children upon birth. Now, they are children that are not even encountered in the numbers, but does that mean they don't exist? So you can see you get challenges on very many different areas. And of course, many say that it's in the mother's right to do so. On the other hand, if you work with children's rights, you get into a conflict, an ethical conflict on, looking at this. So, and then what I think is really interesting is that you have so many different data collectors in the field. And that's basically what's my main topic today. And what is data? And I can tell you, we work with photographs, we work with court records, we work with administrative data, military data, we work with personal diaries, we work with anything, films, anything that you can get. Because very often the first indication that at all this group of children exist can be a minor newspaper note or whatever. So, and then, if there's one case, usually, there are more. It's just a question of how do you get the snowball running. And that we try to do now within the foundation that I work with, and also with other researchers into, for example, war areas such as in Ukraine, where we know that children are born through the Russian aggression. So thinking data broadly. Now, of course, then a lot of these data is collected by NGOs, many of them funded by state agencies or donors. Very often they write reports. You may question how, also these data collectors have their own agenda. The ways of putting forward topics or not, the way very often the methodology is not clearly laid out. Very often they don't share the data. Well, I have encountered, and which was one of the reasons why I'm pushing this, so that, for example, governments fund several projects where I say it would be wonderful to know about what's the outcome. What has happened? What happens after the report? And these qualitative interviews, for example, have been done with these women or children. What happens? What happens with health records that are collected by various NGOs in the field? Very important information that can be for us in the long run to give us an indication of what is actually happening with a vulnerable group, such as during the Rwandan genocide, where in the meantime, we know much more than we used to do. But there's no tradition or no idea in data sharing. Now I realize I get so dedicated and I talk too long. So just but you can see, I guess you get the point that thinking just not in terms of data collected for research, every data I think can be basically used for research. It depends on the topic you're working on. And then, of course, the accessibility, keeping in mind that you have ethical obligations. And we have a huge discussion even about sharing qualitative data, qualitative interviews within our research field. Is it possible? Should it be done? If you black out everything to anonymize them? And I always keep on saying, why do we talk about what's not possible? I mean, why there's so much expertise? Why don't we turn it around and say, well, what can we, based on the experiences we do have, actually share? Because, in my opinion, we have an ethical duty also not to over-research the vulnerable populations. I was asked, oh, Ingvild, do you want to go to Al-Hol and interview the interned, detained people from children and adults from ISIS? And I said, why, what should I do there? Now, it's a devastating setting. I don't speak the languages. Another researcher hanging out there, and I can tell you those people that have been there say it's crowded by people that are doing things with the people where you ask yourself, what's the benefit for these people that are there? So, and then you have different requirements by funding agencies. And I would really like that also the funding agencies of NGOs or governments get into what we are doing here at the RDA, what we're promoting here at the RDA. What is, that's see the value in it, in this challenge, that at least we start addressing how can different things be shared and when can it be shared unproblematic. Also with regard to the methodology, and so that it's transparent, so that we have a possibility of actually objectively evaluating the results of what's happening. And then, of course, we have different disciplines, ethical backgrounds. But what I keep on saying is that researchers are so many other places than just in the academia so the research is done in so many different places, so we need to look broader. And I would really like to have many more of these organizations and NGOs actively participating in the RDA, also, by the way, intergovernmental organizations. So I'll finish up in a very short time. But what I've tried to do for my research field and then to organize it and say that, okay, we build this house and I want to have a virtual hub. And basically, you have to take into account for all these areas that you have different data and sources, and where you take into the consideration, of course, the fair and the care principles. And then I work in the practical field with practitioners, and I'll be in Washington at the United States Peace Institute next week and try to talk to them from a little different angle. And with regard to conflict-related sexual violence, the Murad Code is pretty known for how do you collect information, how do you get evidence, because we're talking about wartime evidence to be used in the international criminal courts and other courts. So, but of course, it's still data. Yeah, so it's somehow, and the Murad Code, for those of you who don't know, is from Nadia Murad, the Yazidi woman who was captured by the ISIS and enslaved during the genocide in 2014, and she got the Nobel Peace Prize years ago, and she's proactively engaged in actually securing the rights of these women, including them in the data collection, information knowledge collected process. When you read it, it's just like reading a lot of our ethical guidelines, but with a specific different angle. So I have in an article coming up now, its book is published in December, and I've actually tried to merge a little bit those two traditions. So with a colleague, Elke Kleinau, we've written an article where we use the research data cycle here and really try to look at, from our research perspectives, you know, what happens if you try to look at all the steps here with regard to what can we recommend other researchers working on children born of war to do if they want to make sure from the beginning that their data is both ethical and can be shared in the end. So basically what you would think that every researcher already does, but they obviously don't. So we're just trying to break it down to make it tangible. And well, maybe in future, I'll be able to tell you if I've been successful. Thank you. Edith? The floor is yours. Do you have your presentation now?
Sorry. And I apologize for being late. I normally never late, but today it was something on the road. Yeah, we live outside of the city, so it was a traffic jam.
Cars in the way?
Yeah, but yesterday it was not similar.
But why don't I see it? I have a contact lens, so I still don't see it. But Edith, you can just start talking. Yeah, you can talk even without slides, I know. So.
No, not this time. I think it's not this time.
Yeah.
But in any case, she's going to talk about the role of ethics in data science and in the RDA.
How can I move the mouse? Yeah, I will need this presentation. The second one.
This one?
Yes. So I talked, you know that I'm a former politician. I'm not a scientist. Yeah, so I'm not a scientist myself. I just care about the science, and I do work a lot with the science domain. And I talked that I'd like to raise the issue here, which is very important for the like-minded countries around the world from 2022 already. And I just wanted to show it for you in few slides. Yeah, so these are the things I am talking about, that in April last year, the White House came out with the proposal, the Declaration on the Future of the Internet. How should be the Internet remain free for the future? What does it mean? Where are the clash at the global stage?
It was followed and signed by 70 countries across the world. These are the kind of like-minded countries, as we call them as from now, Japan, Australia, Brazil. Yeah, so the 99% of the RDA community currently is living in those countries or working in those countries, who signed the declaration and are either part of the G7, which was just following it with their conclusion in Berlin last year. And then the European Union itself made its own declaration on digital rights and principles, underlining the importance of it. It was supported very largely by all the EU institutions, which is very rare. So the European Parliament, the Council, and the Commission, it was a three-party signature last December for those principles. And therefore, it's such an important document that I thought that we have to look in RDA what it is in it for us. Here I put the declaration itself, not the signed version, but the original paper, before its signature. It has 6 dimensions, putting the people to the center, clearly state that any technology, any methodology has to be a human-centric. It has the human direction. The net neutrality in this case, or the net technology, doesn't exist because people design the technologies, the methodologies, and therefore this has to be, the people have to be in the center. It underlines the importance of solidarity and the inclusion, but in the same time, we have to ensure the freedom choice online, and the European slogan is very easy here. What you can do offline, you can do online. If something is prohibited to do by offline, then it should be the same principle applying, that it shouldn't be done in the internet environment or the digital environment either. It's very much about the increasing safety, security, and empowerment of individuals as part of the safety and security. And it's also very much about promoting the sustainability of the digital future, which means a lot of things, but for instance, that we take care of the sustainable development goals and the efficiency of any kind in our work. Yeah, so I put here together the 6 major elements, a bit more detailed, and we as EU promote those values across the world. But I'm sure that the other countries who are signatories of the original document, the 70 countries, are discussing it. And one place they discuss it, of course, is the United Nations itself. At the moment, the work is going on with the compass. But I didn't want to put here the compass itself, because I think that it's not RDA context shouldn't be that we just be part of the UN discussion, which is the political layer. I think that what I'd like to offer here, that we as an interested people in ethics within the RDA try to think that how we can put practices on place, best practices on place, where these kind of values are kind of built into the daily work of any RDA community person or any community practices for the future. Yeah, so I just list here once more, a bit more recently, that how we can work on this. And of course, if you read those lines, you can see that who are those who are not like-minded countries, yeah, or who are probably have too big difference in their way of democratic thinking, compared to those countries who initiated this process. And we also see that we have a global warming, but we have very much the same time the global cooling. Yeah, we are moved from the hot peace directly to the Cold War recently. So what was something nice to have in the past, it became a very concrete choices and very direct choices for the community, that how we deal with our data. And I know that the original declaration is about more the digital environment as such, but data is a special, unique part of the digital environment. And therefore, I think that the major question for us, and I just go through those slides because you can see it's available for all of us, has some meaning for the RDA. So what does it mean for the RDA? I think that this is the question I like to raise here in that intergroup. And if it what are, so the questions are that what are the principles for the digital, so the principles which were agreed, it's for the digital markets as a digital domain as a whole, being public or private, but we are definitely not a private, we are a public domain. What do we think that from this digital thing is valid and a kind of moral obligation for us researchers to think, what is it the same? Is it different? If there is a difference, how is the difference, and how we can put this into the practice? I think that this is the question for us. As I said, the current RDA community is 95% under the countries who support those initiatives. Therefore, we are very united. But on the other side, RDA decided in the very beginning that we are open globally. So what does it mean for us? Does it mean that we are more careful? Does it mean that we kind of rethink our strategy, or we are just more caution? So what does it mean for us being global or being like-minded? Put it bluntly, this question to the table. And so, as I said, it's the principles are not targeted the data. Data is an important element, I think, of the digital ecosystem, but maybe we can think about that, what could be in it for us. Yeah, and I know that it's a very macro level, but if the RDA wish to be the leader for practitioners in the global arena, then I think that it would be useful to have an exchange of views and maybe to agree something on it, that how we do it in the practice. It's easy to say that like-minded countries are talking to the like-minded countries, but it's not so easy in the research, which is global. And what we do with the digital principles, if the researchers are not aware of them, simply just the promotion of this declaration, I think it could be a very big added value through this research community, which is the most trusted, at least. The Eurobarometer regularly check that who are the most trusted communities, and the most trusted community in Europe by large is the researchers. People fortunately believed the researchers much more than the politicians, but it comes with the moral obligation that we play our role to make it happen. So I think that this is what we have to decide, that do we wish to work on this? Do we wish to put as RDA our hands on it as an ethical intergroup? And then how we can define our work, how we can develop it, and how we can promote it to the RDA community and beyond. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Edith. I forgot to say in the beginning, please, may I please ask you to go into the collaborative notes, which you will find in the program, but just to enter your name and affiliations, so we keep a list of, the attendance. So if you please do so, that would be great. It's also for updating for future activities, if you're interested. I guess that's something which is done in all sessions, as far as I know, always. So that would be great. Now I have next on the list, Elif, on revisiting human rights. Don't know if she's...
I didn't see Elif.
No, I haven't seen her either.
Francis will come, he's in the other session, but okay, if they come, they don't make a presentation.
Yeah, sure, but he will. But at least, and Daniel is he here? No, but at least talking about trust, then at least we have the trust presentation here. So I would ask you, Derva, to come up and see if I find the right screen this time. Oh no, I know that I'm on the there. No, here. Now I figured it out.
I think it may be like that.
There you are. Where's your presentation? Where did it go?
You see there's a folder here. Okay, you click that.
Yeah. I think we found it. Here.
Good.
There you are. And there. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Dawei Lin. I'm from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, which is a part of NIH, National Institute of Health in the US. And so I will be presenting the perspective from data repositories. And I I'm a computational biology by training, so like now it's kind of part of the data science. So so kind of ask the question, like, you know, what is one thing that can make or break our credibility in data science? And that's ethics, because if the ethics is wrong, then we don't have a trust. And if we don't have a trust, and our work does not have impact. So in the age that the data is shaping our choices, like we talk about, like, you know, the healthcare, the politics, the crisis, and so the ethical management is not just an option, is an obligation. So so what I want to talk about is about the ethics management through the lens of trust principles, which is a principles is kind of developed by the interest group, like one of the interest group that and the RDA, and I saw like Bob is kind of one of the trust developers, and I know you see how like the data repository will take into account the ethical issues. So trust is an acronym of 5 principles. Is transparency, responsibility, user focus, sustainability, and technology. And I put the QR code there, and also the paper about like 3 years ago. So you can look at the paper for more detail, but I was trying to kind of summarize the main part of it just to help start with the conversation. And then the first column on your left is the principles. Each row is one of the principles, and then in the middle is the general guidelines that for, you know, any repository, and that's what do we want to do. Like, you know, it doesn't matter is you just start up or you're like a mature repository, or the repository that may be sunset for different purposes. So for transparency is really about to be transparent about your specific repository services and data holdings that can be verifiable by the public evidence. I think that is the key thing, that you have to be verifiable, and then based on the public available evidence, which means like you trust but verify. And then along that line, for ethics, is you have to disclose the data source. I think we heard from Ingrid, like, you know, like for the War of Children, like where the data come from, right? And then the how do you collect the data, and what is your decision-making processes, and also like is you kind of disclose any biases you can perceive, and then let your user know. And the next principle is the responsibility, which is to really fulfill your promise and your responsibilities to make for the promises you made. And to in that end is to be responsible for ensuring the authenticity and integrity of data holdings, and for the reliability and persistence of the services. And the ethical elements in that is that you will conduct that the diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and maybe other ethical issues. And then you check if you're consistently compliance, and then revisit that. And also like make sure like you have the people around the repository have enough training, because the ethical field is constantly changing. And then the next principle is user focus. And I heard actually added using different word, like it's people, right? I think that's is really about, I think I will agree that the people is the center of all the things we do. And then that's to ensure the data management norms and the expectations of the target user community are met. And so the ethical consideration in the user perspective is to include the diverse views. You know, everybody kind of have a seat at a table, and then also that to consistently access the ethical need. You know, with the eyes on, you know, the needs will change because of the technical advances like AI, or maybe the social changes like the wars, right? And then the next principle is sustainability, which is to sustain the services and preserve holding for the long term. And I think this is one of the most important aspect of trust principles. And I think Ingrid mentioned there was a care principles, there were fair principles, there's a lot of other principles. And I think the relationship in my mind is that the fair principle is really about the data properties, right? This machine readable. And then the trust principle is about to make it that desirable property long term. And care principle is for everyone, right? Like everyone have to use. So that's kind of the landscape we're talking about. So for sustainability, is the ethical concerns is about that you need to like allocate some long-term plans. It's not ad hoc issue. It's a long-term issue, and also that you have enough resources to support the to address the ethical concerns. And the last one is the but not the least one is the technology, is to provide infrastructure and capabilities to support secure, persistent, and reliable services. And to support the ethical efforts is use the technology to enforce ethics and monitor the violations. For example, I think most people like we heard from throughout the conference is not they're not willing to help. It's sometimes they don't know. So like if there's a technology can detect, you know, the biases, and then they can feed back to the people who are working on this that can address those biases. So that's kind of the technology part of the operation. And then so that's kind of FIRE principles. And so I want to summarize what I talk about is like for transparency is really about for disclosure to foster trust, and for responsibility is that you make sure like there's ongoing compliances that's kind of your commitment. And for user focus is the inclusivity and assessment like is uphold the ethical standard. And the sustainability is long-term planning to secure your ethical integrity. And then for technology is the technology ensure the ethical enforcement and monitoring. And so again, like ethics is not an option, is a critical for the value of the data reuse. So thank you.
Yeah, and then it's together with Francis, so they come together, I think. Yeah, but anyhow, I think that we have enough presentation, enough ideas to start the discussion, and then they are coming. And Daniel Mitchell normally never comes in person, so I don't know where he's Daniel, but he's one of the co-chairs. And yeah, so Ingrid will.
I think you need to stand at the microphone because it's streamed,
Yeah,
so it would be great if you're here with me.
Just to repeat it for those who are online, as the two speakers are yet engaged in another session, we start the discussion. We start the discussion. When they come, we will interrupt the dialogue, and then they will make a presentation. But it already highlights the current issue with the intergroup, which we have to discuss afterwards. That at the end of the discussion, that if we are also busy, that how we find the people who can run this intergroup and dedicate their time really what is needed for that intergroup, because I think that, as you, David, described, now this is not a choice, it's a critical operational thing, that the ethics flag is very high above the RDA community, and therefore we have to solve this. Yeah. So you will run the discussion, Ingrid?
Obviously.
And then I will come up with the charter and the...
Okay. So I open the floor for questions and well, maybe we start with some questions first, if anybody has some questions directed to any of the presenters so far. Oh yeah, we have a microphone going around. So yes. And can you please also indicate your name and your affiliation so that can keep track of it?
Yeah, hi, I'm Mirta. I'm a data steward from the University of Leiden for the Faculty of Humanities, and also the secretary for the ethics committee of that faculty. I have a question for Daiwei. Thanks for your talk. I'm a bit surprised to hear you talk about AI-assisted monitoring for ethical violations and biases. A bit of an optimistic take, given the recent controversies about human biases that have crept into the large language models and the AIs that we know. So how do you see that developing? How do you?
I think it's a very important question, and I think I don't have an answer, like, how we're going to do it. I think that's going to be the whole community have to work on it.
If anyone does, let us know, I guess.
Yeah. But I think I do think the this is like is interaction between the different communities. I think I feel the ethical issues is now kind of really got people's attention is because of AI, right? We think about like the atomic weapons, like I think there's children, like and also like I think in the US there is this police report, like the facial recognitions is the error rate is like much higher for Black Americans versus the Caucasian Americans, and those are the ones that actually triggered some revolution in terms of addressing the biases. For example, for the facial detection, the Google scientists go back to see why the error happens is because of the training data, right? And then they can now to working on to make sure they have a high quality data, and then from different perspectives. So I think it's more like, it's not like a one-time solution. As I said, I think it have to be long-term planning, that how we kind of go with the technical advances, the revolutions, and go back circles.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, so
you need to get or the onliners don't hear you.
Thank you. So is this working? So my question is for Edith, and I think it's laudable some of the issues that you were raising there, and very important as well. But I'd like to put on the hat of the skeptic at this point, as I think, especially when we're talking about ethical issues, we need to ask, like, whose ethics, whose values are we trying to push on others, for example? And when you're talking about doing something internationally, and you mentioned that, for instance, the U.S. has a particular legislation that's been passed, and actually there are, for example, the laws for protecting human subjects there, that when you talk about research data being the focus in the Code of Federal Regulations 46. Well, it's basically 46 is the code. It's stating that we have to protect the human subjects and ensure that our research doesn't, violate their privacy, for example. And we have to ensure that there is no risk to them, or at least, if there's going to be some potential risk, the human subjects need to know about that. And at the same time, we need to find a balance between the benefit of taking such a risk and the potential damage that taking such a risk would incur here. So I'm just wondering, when the European Union, they have their laws too, and other countries have their laws. So I'm just wondering, when we're talking about something that's more global, are we just going to be repeating what some of these existing laws are doing, and in that sense trying to ameliorate or find a common ground, if you will, between them? Or are we trying to look at a way of improving on this? Any insight that you might share, I think, would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, I think that the politicians are very good to describe, and I was for many years one of them. So I'm thinking with their head. So they are thinking on the what, yeah, but they are not the one who can go down to the individual level, to the researcher level or the user level, to think that this what, how to be done. Yeah. So the question I do have, as one of the long-standing supporter of the RDA, that how those what agreed on the top level can be done by the community like we are. Does it mean anything for us? Do we need to change something in our own behavior, own approach? Yeah, or nothing. Yeah, if we do nothing, this what has no value. Yeah, because unless you do things, the things cannot change. Yes, the politicians cannot make this change happen. It's only the professionals can do that. Yeah, and I do not know, because I am just one of you. Yeah, in that community, that shall we do nothing? Just wait and follow the others? Or do we have some ideas on the what? What does it mean for repository, for the trust principle, for the care principle? What does it mean for us in the daily operation? What does it mean? Because as you could see, the democratic distinction is a very important one. What does it mean for RDA as a whole if the people from other countries who never signed those, never agreed those principles would apply to our organizations? What we would do? Would we decide? Would we postpone decisions? And if we would decide which direction we would decide, we do not know ourselves what is the next step. And I think that the RDA community is not a follower community. We are leaders. Yeah, we are leaders to figure out the standards, what is best for research and research data. So for me, ethics just became a subject, as Davey rightly said, that it's in this very divided, fast-changing world, it became something actionable. We have to consider, it has to be in our mind, not only, when I'm a project evaluator for many European research projects, yeah, there is a question, gender. Everyone put a click on, yeah, or there is a, do you use embryos to your research? It's a regular question in the evaluation, and we click it on. But I do not think that we do much more than this. Yeah, I do not think that we go deeply in and we make a special analysis that did the people put some effort to make this ticks, yeah, or they just did it by routine. Yeah, and ethic cannot be something from routine. It has to be the lifestyle, but it cannot be routine. Yes, so I think it's a more active mindset what is needed for ethics. And therefore, for the RDA community is really the question, are we a follower and we are waiting that someone will find a recipe that how we have to behave, or opposite, we have to think that how our behavior might need to be different here and there, and the nuances we can promote to the community to pick it up and take it seriously. The values, if they are coming from routine and not a kind of active approach in our mindset, do not work neither for a person, neither for a community. And I think that this is what the ethical intergroup has to think, to change this routine maybe to a bit more active. Yeah, so I definitely do not wish to wait. I do not wish to modify what the politicians agreed, but I just like to know that what does it mean for a researcher next day in the job.
Thank you.
So I put myself on the list now, if I may, because there's so many interesting aspects popping up. And I was just thinking about the exchange now between Bob and Edith and related to also my own research. Well, first of all, I'm presently co-principal investigator in an ERC consolidator grant on children born of war in 4 different generations. And actually, we had a pretty heavy ethical exchange and over and over again with the ERC, and we had to have a huge panel. So I think there's actually a lot going on awareness. Amongst others, the data collection on the children of ISIS fighters was somehow put on hold because they didn't know, or they didn't believe that we would be able to collect data ethically, because these children are still quite young. So I think there's more into just ticking the box from my experience over the past 2 years, which I think is good. I think that although AI may have accelerated it, in my case, when you work interdisciplinary and internationally, I can only say I'm Norwegian. So when I collect data, and I work in Germany, and we did the same survey among these vulnerable adult children born of war years back, and the ethical procedure in Germany was very different to Norway. Those who know Norway know they're very strict on very many things. So, and it's all very centralized. So I totally agree that one of the challenges is, of course, data is without borders, very often too, but still in many cases with borders. And we don't have, I think, proper guidelines in many aspects for how do we deal with the interdisciplinarity and internationality and with the data sharing, because that causes a lot of discussions where you enter national politics. And just to give you one more idea, in Norway, we have personal numbers. So one of the baseline studies we have in Norway, which is really good from 2004, was connecting the registered data, administrative data of the Norwegians fathered by German soldiers. It was a very methodological, heavy procedure, but at least they were able to identify 1,000, which is pretty much in this population. And through the personal numbers, the researcher, Dag Ellingsen, was able to connect with health registries, education, divorce, suicide, a lot of stuff. So for our purposes, this is unique because it makes it possible to have an evidence base on a hidden population, which has much more evidence than the others. Many of, I wouldn't say it's not good to have qualitative interviews. It's just very different. You answer different research questions. And now I know in Germany, I just read a statement by Rat für sozialwissenschaftliche Daten on the new data concept, and where they ask, how do you open, for example, German registered data for more research, which I think they do it in the Netherlands, they do it in Scandinavian countries, but still it's very restricted to who's able to use it. So only Norwegians that you can actually prosecute if they do something wrong, but then be able maybe to access it. So I see a lot of these challenges there. And then just one more, and that is when you talk about the long run, how do we always know in the long run that we actually fulfill ethical guidelines? Because a very easy case is the dream waivers, those who were registered officially, the children of immigrants in the US, who under Obama were able to come out and then get the citizenship. They were registered, they were put. And then when Trump came, one of the first things he said was, great, we have them all. We know who they are. Let's get them out of the country. So I think we have I think with our experience of this group, and RDA is the perfect place to address maybe, guidelines, but with cases. I think it's important to make it tangible. And I think it's very important that through the cases, we can make at least awareness building and not the kind of one size fits all, because I don't believe we will ever find that. But at least, obviously, we need to find ways of working around it. But now I'll stop. But see, I've been thinking a lot about these things. Yes, Claudia.
My name, is it on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. My name is Claudia Medeiros. I'm from Brazil. And I was in some session yesterday where someone commented on the fact that privacy is context dependent. And then I remembered, because people tend to think, especially those who make up the regulations, in a very binary way. So I remember that a couple of months ago, I had a conversation with two anthropologists who work with indigenous populations in Brazil. At a distance, these populations are what I would call across the street in Brazilian terms, okay? A few 100 kilometers or maybe tens of kilometers. And they were discussing which attributes to blackout or to hide to protect the privacy of the individuals or of the population. And they were absolutely opposite in saying this should be made public. And the other would say this should be not, because it depended on the culture of those populations. So this is kind of an example of what you were talking about. And the other thing, and that's the legislation part. In Brazil, the ethics committees and the regulations are all centered and dictated by people who work in health. And the social scientists are, let us say, they are ignored in terms of other sensitive data that the medical professionals do not think about. So you were talking about making people aware. Up to which level should we take these differences in consideration so as not to go nitpicking? And saying make people aware of the differences is not enough to help anyone decide how to implement these things. These are comments. These are not questions. Okay. So Francis is here.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I just add I think how I got involved that the kind of the discussion. I think the one of the motivation is that I found like the working with like a wide topic like ethics and working with different kind of people. The important thing is that can we say something in one voice? And I think that's what the FAIR principle is about, right? It's like, so the FAIR principle, I think the main contribution is really raise the awareness that data is important. It's not just the data scientists, but also politicians. And, they talk about at the United Nations in like FAIR principles. I think that is important way to start. And then the trust principle, like we also have really inspired by the FAIR principles, is that there's a lot of certification standards for trustworthy repositories, and we can all argue like which standards is important, is good, right? But that's not the point. Is that we have to kind of make sure that people understand the repository is important. And then so that would kind of come with the trust principle, because the most important thing for the repository is the trustworthy, right? To make the data whatever the property you like long term. And I think the similar things like for CARE principle, right? I think the ethical issue is important. So I think maybe one thing to start thinking is that if there's continued discussion for this interest group of ethics with data, then what is the one message that we can bring to people, say the ethic in data is important? I think that would maybe need a kind of, once we have agreed upon with that, and that message may kind of let people collaborate to working on their own, to solve their own problems. So that I think the message, I think is probably the first step.
Yeah.
My name is Live Kvala. I'm from the University of Oslo. In my own research, I've come across the notion of shared stewardship from archival science, used to emphasize the ownership that the population have to their collection in archives. And I think we have to think in a similar way when we work with research data, so that the archiving, it's not when it's human subject data, then it's not the researcher's data, it's the data of the research subjects. And then we have to find a way of ensuring that the voice of the research subject is heard along the way, because it feels completely absurd, like you talk about with regulations saying that this is what you have to do if the understanding of privacy of the research participant in a different context is completely different from the understanding of privacy from the location of your university. And as research is global, we have to find ways of lifting up the voice of the participants, because we have to respect participants. If we interview activists and they want their voice to be heard, we have to respect them. We have to also make sure that we don't put them at unnecessary risk. But if they want to play that risk, who are we then to limit their voice in this? So I think respecting research participants' wishes is something that has to lift up, and we need, I think, more research on what research participants want, because I think most research participants, they want something, they have an agenda as well when they accept contributing to research, and we need to learn more about what that agenda is.
There, and then over there, and then I'll let Francis talk, and then we continue the discussion.
I'm Susan Shingeldecker with ESIP Earth Science Information Partners. And this year we've made our theme for the year Grounded in Trust, Data Ethics Empowers Collaboration. And so I'm here because we're not experts in data ethics, trying to glean as much information as I can to inform our work this year. And a question that I've been having is looking for, is there a landscape map of the issues associated with data ethics? It seems to me in the various talks I've been to in the last 2 days focused on ethics, each field seems to have really important elements to it, but they may be distinct but related to each other. And then each part of the data lifecycle has different ethical concerns associated with it. I mean, I would love to see, I don't know if the interest group wants to work on it, like a landscape map of data ethics and how it plays out across the data lifecycle, and then maybe specific to different domains or different research areas that someone could look at, and it would inform your perspective and maybe map to where the expertise lies to go deeper in those areas. So for instance, ethics in data collection, ethics in data management, ethics in repositories. And then for me, I really think about, if we achieve what we really aim to achieve in FAIR and CARE, I mean, I think, that first researcher that collects the data and maybe has the relationship with the community and understands the privacy concerns of that Indigenous group or whoever they're working with, if the data really becomes interoperable and reusable, it's those unintended consequences when it is reused for a purpose 20, 30 years from now. Building that into the ethics is something I would love to see. So that is, I kind of ask, it's a question to see if that exists. And if it doesn't exist, what would it take to build something like that?
I don't know if anything exists, would love to have.
I'd like to come before we give the floor to Francis. When this last year things happened, then for me the word human-centric and not technology-centric was a call why I initiated this discussion. And I think that this is what you mentioned, Dave. This is you mentioned in the back that it's a human-centric to think about the researcher and think about not only the user but the community as a whole, the people. So and I think that this human-centric data is something which we have to somehow initiate, maybe from this intergroup if we agree, and then to figure out that how we will do that. Yes, do the map, collect people who are interested and willing to work, and then figure out that how long we can go together and where the different working groups have to be established, starting from this intergroup maybe to deal with the very concrete proposal. But the intergroup would be a kind of steering wheel and a meeting point to keep it on the top agenda and to make a statement that it's not only the digital which is human-centric, but the data itself is a human-centric, and the human is not only the researcher, not only the librarian, not only the one who will use it directly next day, but the humanity is the owner of the human-centric data. So if we can start from this point, it was a music for my ears.
Take 2 words on that. If I may?
Yeah, sure.
There was someone there. Is that it? There wasn't one there.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. So it's just an answer. A brief remark. When you're talking about humans, do not forget there's also ethics in collecting samples from plants and animals.
Mm.
Okay, for endangered species. Oh, okay. I just remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is working. Okay, great. So to your comment, I think that's a fantastic idea of going to the human-centric, looking at how the folks who participate in research want their data to be used. And I think one thing that would be really interesting is to think about, or sorry, let me introduce myself, Lauren Maxwell, Universitätsklinikum Heidelberg. So one thing that I think is really important is to think about, from where the person is starting and their relationship to their own data, what happens in the data lifecycle. And I think that goes to the other speaker's comment about how could we actually understand what happens in the data reuse to impact lifecycle. And what we need is metadata. So we really need metadata to understand, from the human perspective, what do they want done with their data? Then what happens? So how does that interact with what the research ethics committee does to the data? How does that interact with, the folks, the repository where the data are stored, and then the folks who are using the data, and then the actual eventual hopeful impact and research translation of those data. And I think if we could get the metadata to describe that, then we could have some better answers about what happens and where we really need to intervene in terms of making sure that people's intentions and their own data are then executed as we're navigating this cycle that we exist in. And one other comment. So one issue that we have in understanding people's perspectives on using their data is that there's absolutely no ability to compare the different measurements that are made across space and time. And so another thing of interest is, so we've conducted a systematic review where we put together all the different measurement tools that are that have been used around broad consent for future use. And the objective there is to come up with a question bank that we could then have a community of experts test and then develop a measurement tool that can be used can be developed, and we can assess the psychometric properties. Then we can think about measurement invariance over space and time. So we could think about whether or not these questions are answering the same or measuring the same constructs across these different populations. And so I think that could be perhaps the topic of interest of thinking about how can we actually measure knowledge, attitudes, and practices around data reuse.
Okay, I think we have 12 more minutes and then we have a real long coffee break. So I would like to give Francis the word, and then we can continue with your good questions and discussions around. But yeah. How much? And then we have announcements, exactly. So we need to have time for the announcements too. Yeah.
Good, thank you.
You need to come up here to use the microphone.
No, I don't need this. Thank you, Edith. Thank you very much. And thank you, Edith, as well. It's nice to be here. I apologize for coming late, and I also apologize for interrupting a very good discussion. I was going to say something about data in situ and the importance of the context in which data is pulled from. Just to tie into your discussion a bit, some things I was thinking about was that way mentioned very importantly, how do we come to, let's say, a single position on ethics? It's very difficult, huh? We know right now, for example, that the Declaration of Helsinki is up for review. It's been opened up for review together in a certain sense, but not completely really, but also the Declaration of Taipei. The Declaration of Taipei is, so the Declaration of Helsinki is kind of our basic document for ethics in biomedical research, let's say, health-related research. And the Declaration of Taipei is actually an appendix, so that's the way the World Medical Association sees it, as a kind of appendix to Helsinki, where it deals with data and biological samples. Problem is, it's very difficult to come to, let's say, the kinds of standards that we have in science, to have those same kinds of similar standards in ethics, I think. That's why we always keep reviewing and revising and so forth, Helsinki or Taipei, whatever it is we're doing, because on the one hand, in science, we think there's something universal about knowledge. We think that when we say something is true, it's universally true to a certain extent. But when we say something about people and what's important to people, we also want to take into account what's important to the people themselves. And I think that relates a bit to that discussion on research participants in clinical research or in health-related research or research generally. How do we bring the research participants in? And one of the things we commented on recently was the ICH E6R3. So it's the third revision of the ICH Good Clinical Practice Guidelines. Now, if you read those guidelines, there are guidelines that are about clinical trials. And everybody who does clinical trials will tell you right away, oh, the patient is the key person, the patient is the most important person. And you can read ICH and you will see how important the patient is when you're reading ICH. The only thing is you won't see in ICH is you won't see in the Good Clinical Practice Guideline or any other one for that matter, you won't see the patient. So you have ethics committees, you have investigators, and you have sponsors. By the way, you don't have regulatory authorities; they should be there too. But you don't have the research participants, and so there's no role given to them. There's no explicit place given for them within the discussion, and I think that's why, and that's how I came to this thinking about data in situ. It happened that I was at a GA for GH meeting in London about 6 months ago or something, and at the Royal Society there. And we had this meeting, and the people were talking about during the Ebola crisis how people from the north, let's say, had gone to different African countries, and they had gone home with the data from the Ebola patients. And they were saying how wrong this is, and how incredibly this shouldn't happen. Of course, it's wrong. It's obviously wrong, but it's not only wrong; it's also stupid. I thought. Sorry to use that word, but it's not an intelligent way to deal with data, because when you remove the data from the context in which you've gathered that data, you devalue that data. You make it less rich, less useful. You also no longer have the link with the patient, the link with the situation in which the data is taken from. So it made me think a little bit. A lot of what we try to do when we build data repositories, when we build our data systems, is to try to collect as much data as possible. And we've been having a tendency to think about, oh, the data is siloed someplace. But it might not only be siloed, it might also be in the place where it should be, in the context where it should be. You know, you want your data in your hospital, near to your doctor, near to your surgeon, near to your nurse. So you want this. And we should also think about this important relationship between data and the data subject, be that subject a human person or be that subject a table or something else. And I think also, and I'll stop here, but I think also this is going to come up very strongly when we start to talk more about digital twins too, and the relationship between persons and their data, and how we make those relationships and how those descriptions hold and where they hold and where they're, you know, one of the questions I asked at a recent meeting in Leuven on digital twins was, well, where do we house our digital twin? Who's going to feed our digital twin? Who's going to give it water? Who's going to take care of it? It's kind of absurd, but in a certain sense, it's important where that data resides and how that data is maintained in its relationship to the subject of the data. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Nina Lewis. I'm from Monash University in Australia. I work with Alex Lab, Artificial Intelligence for Law Enforcement and Community Safety. And I'd like to return to the issue of both the desires and motives for participation and the data rights of data subjects, because it's something that's absolutely implicit in the work that we're doing. And so I spoke yesterday on the data principles framework that we've put in place: valid, veracity, agency, longevity, and integrity and dignity for data. And the reason that we have, you know, not all data, we also have to recognise that not all data is collected from data participants. There's a lot of secondary use of data. There's a lot of administrative and NGO data and all sorts of data, population data. And that's why we have dignity as well as agency, because absolutely we want to ensure agency for data participants where that's possible, but especially where that's not possible, it's really important that dignity, human dignity, is embedded into data principles. And I agree that it's totally about capturing the types of metadata that you need to carry participants' wishes or basic dignity and data rights through space and time and different uses. And a point I made yesterday is we might be able to keep, for example, the technical integrity of data instances, and they may remain unchanged, but your data set never remains unchanged, because by going through time and social context and all sorts of things, it changes. And I also wanted to just touch on that point that I totally agree that, I'm sorry, I missed your name, the commentator from Brazil. Human-centric positions, despite what I'm saying about how important they aren't the full picture for ethics, and the rights of animals and plants and environment is super important. And that also comes to that question of whose ethics are we talking about, and whether or not you're subscribing to a worldview that is wholly anthropocentric. So those were just kind of my contributions, and thank you for this session. It's been amazing. So yeah. And I'm happy to talk to anyone about valid or any of the other issues. So catch me in the breaks.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we need to wrap up now, or you wanna, I don't know how long you need for your we need to make some decisions, yeah. So that's why. Yeah, I saw that some, yeah, okay. Just to come together, yeah. So the intergroup, the research data intergroup on ethics, was one of the first intergroup was funded, but in the late 2 years, due to some unforeseen issues, the intergroup
has been less active, how to say, and I think that this is the top moment to change this. Therefore, I think that we have to decide maybe two things. One thing I like to suggest to you, that Oya Beyan, who used to be the co-chair of the intergroup, emphasized that she cannot continue due to personal and very sad circumstances happened in her family, and therefore we wish to suggest the immediate replacement of Oya by her very close colleague with the super knowledge. You have seen Maria, so we wish to introduce Maria. And I'd like to get a kind of sympathy vote that could you agree that we change Oya on the agreement and on the initiation of Oya by Maria being a co-chair to be elected for the working group. So yeah, if there is no objection, then Maria, come to me, come here. And the second thing we need to decide that you could all see that we put together the paper, few of us, for this workshop, but maybe we wish to think, and I suggest that we wish to think of the new charter for the intergroup for after renewal. So if you would agree that we put the collaborative note together for this document, we try to initiate something, but the final quality of this charter will depend very much on you. So I suggest that in the next 6 months, we intensively work together with you guys to get it done and consolidate. I think that we collected already from this session many words. Dignity, I like very much the dignity, including plants. I think that yeah, etc. And maybe you think that if you wish to be more active in the intergroup, then I think that it would be nice to have a co-chair from other continents, from yeah, not from Europe, because it's a bit Europe headed at the moment. So please tell us if you are willing to take a more active role. And I think that there's a
suggestion there, because because my experience is that very often things then are kind of lost. So if you have an interest in being proactive in the group, maybe you can make an asterisk in your name in the collaborative notes, so that, or reach out to Edith. But if you make an asterisk, then we can somehow get back to you when we organize sub meetings. But at least then we know, because otherwise, I'm afraid it would.
Yeah, no. I think that the collaborative document would be the best place, that you just put in ideas, and then we will review and we will follow up until the next meeting, which we can have. And that's it. Yeah, Maria, do you wish to say something as a newly elected person?
Well, appointed, I would say, not exactly elected. Yes. Okay, thank you, Edith, for the introduction. I would be very happy if we can have active members, as Edith said. Please let us know if you want to be involved, and I would really like to have another co-chair. I don't know, Daniel.
We have Daniel, and we would need someone from other coordinates. So
yeah, so if you're interested, please contact us, and hope to see you again the next meeting.
So now you can do your first task, officially closing the meeting.
Okay, so if there are any other questions, statements? Okay.
So coffee break and network.
So then I'm closing the meeting.
Yes, and then we go for coffee. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
And of course, Ingrid and me, we will remain always hyperactive in this. Very much.
And just as an aside and off the record, the rocks soil